Good evening. This regular board meeting of the Socorro ISD Board of Trustees will come to order. The date is Thursday, August 14th. The time is 5:35, and we have a confirmed quorum. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item will be public comments, and we have no public comments, so we'll go straight on. We do have public comment. I apologize. Each person who signed up was provided a copy of the open forum basic rules and advised when they signed up that policy BED applies to the process. Please respect the process during your presentation. We will proceed to open forum public comment. Speaker is Mr. Tom Lane. Mr. Tom Lane, you're speaking on item 8D.
Yes.
You want to wait on that item?
Yes, I think that would be fine.
Okay, sir. Thank you. I apologize, I'm going to go step back here. Thank you for joining us for this meeting, both in person and online via YouTube stream. The full recording of the meeting will be available on YouTube and archived to the board website, where viewers have the option of watching the meeting with closed captions translated in multiple languages. The next part, please bear with me. Gracias por acompañarnos en esta reunión, tanto persona como lineada a través de nuestra transmisión de YouTube. La grabación completa de la reunión estará disponible en YouTube y se archivará a través del sitio web de la Junta, donde los espectadores tienen la opción de ver la reunión con subtítulos traducidos a varios idiomas.
Good job.
Next item will be closed session to hear the level 3 grievance hearing response appeal. This meeting will be closed for the level 3 grievance. Mr. Blanco?
Yeah, we're going to hold a closed meeting to hear the level 3 grievance appeal of employee F. Cerda Gerardo, an employee at Pebble Hills High School under Government Code Sections 551071 and 551074. I understand Ms. Cerda Gerardo and her lawyer, Tiger Hanna, are appearing virtually. We should be able to get them up on the screens here in just a minute, but before we start, we'll need to clear the room of anybody who's not involved in the grievance.
Does it pop up here? Okay.
It should pop up.
Oh, fancy.
Looks like I'm not the only one with that question. Alice.
Huh?
You win on that one. You win on that one.
Read that.
And I'm sorry I was late. I would have helped you. Sorry. I was like this. White knuckles, and then there was a cop. Yeah, and he goes right in front, and he turned around like.
Makes it The board is back from executive session. The time is 6:29. Item 5, reconvene open session. Discussion and possible action to address the employee complaint of F. Cerda Gerardo, an employee of Pebble Hills High School, under high school policy DGBA local. Mr. Blanco.
Thank you. We've completed the grievance hearing. You all had your opportunity to deliberate in your own closed session. At this time, it is up for the discussion and action by the board on how you want to respond to the request from Ms. Cerda Gerardo and her attorney during the presentation that we had in closed session.
Any questions?
I do have questions. So for whoever on staff this is applicable to, do we have a local policy in place for how climate surveys are conducted across the district? Do we have a standard operating procedure for that?
Mrs. Stiles, can you please come up in front, please?
Good evening, Vice President, Mr. Guerra, members of the board, Mr. Vasquez. That I'm aware of, no, sir, we don't.
So here is a concern for me, and I want to make sure that this does not become a systemic problem. 9 hours is an extremely short time for any type of climate survey. My previous career, when we had climate surveys, it was at least a week, at a minimum, because that's a lot of people that you want to have the opportunity to take it. Be honest. It can be anonymous. You can require an email address to log in and have that survey be anonymous from that point forward. But if we look at some of the layers of the dynamics within this district that we were dealing with, we have personnel that were not able to go to the health clinic because of the hours, but we're asking 110 people to take a survey in 9 hours. That's extremely concerning to me. So one of the things that I would like to look at across the district is implementing a standard for these climate surveys. Climate surveys should not be necessarily punitive in nature. Like, it shouldn't be a bad thing, like, oh my gosh, there's a climate survey, what's going on? It's a tool to help us grow and get better, and I would like to see them utilized in a positive manner, not a negative manner. On the back end, still talking about the survey, it was mentioned that we have not conducted a survey since that personnel move was made. So we don't really know if things are better. We can assume, we can guess, we can look at metrics, but I value relationships and results. And if you neglect one for the other, that's a trade-off that you have to be careful for. We need to balance those together. And so I think part of that process is, let's do a follow-up. We made a move. Was it the right move? Do we need to adjust? That could be for personnel. That could be for closing a facility. That could be for changing bus routes. That could, I don't care, but there's got to be some type of follow-up mechanism to ensure that we're on the right track. With the survey, well, if I have my timeline accurate, Ms. Cerda was a principal for a little over a year, but this was her first position as a principal. Is that correct? Yes? Was there a mentor principal or a coach or a somebody that could guide a first-year principal through that process? Or was she just kind of put into the role and said, get an A rating, go, and left to her own vices?
Principals are assigned a mentor with the first year principals, and I believe even beyond that if we see them for up to 3 years. And
so is it safe to assume that process had occurred in this situation as well?
I did have a mentor assigned to me from an elementary, Ms. Hansen. And then when we started the new school year, they moved my mentor to a different person, Ms. Principal at Eastlake Middle School. So I was only able to work with one of them about 7 months and the other one maybe 4 months.
So when I look at, thank you, ma'am. When I look at the dynamics of the district during that time frame, and I'm not going to point them out because everybody here lived it. I was just on the other side of the district as a parent. There are a lot of dynamics that we're dealing with. And I think a spirit of reprisal was one of them. Not just from teachers, but from custodial staff, from staff members, from parent concerns. And so one of those things that I want to make sure that we do not fall into as the next chapter is ours. We're turning the page on the past and we're moving forward. Is we have got to fix some of these potential systemic issues and make sure that we have processes in place to help guide and navigate us through some of these situations. Regardless how this vote turns out, I would like to see something codified on if we're going to do a survey. Here's how it's handled. Here's the timeline. Here's the process. Here's the feedback mechanism. Here's the counseling, like whatever that looks like, so that we have a standard across the district of how those are handled. But I am a little frustrated that this whole process took less than 9 hours. That doesn't sit well with me. Everything else is just comments for me. I don't have any more questions. So, Mr. Guerrero, I'll turn it back over to you.
Any other questions?
My question is, first year principal, did we have those difficult conversations? I think what I heard is that there were concerns that came up from different individuals of leadership at that campus. Was that brought up to Ms. Cerda's attention, either by documentation or informal conversations? And was she aware that this climate survey was going to be used to possibly, have her removed? So again, it's about the climate. As a leader, you have to be given the opportunity to adjust and grow and make decisions. And if the data shows that you're not being effective as a leader, you're able to make that transition and say, you know what, I wasn't ready. But were those systems in place? And if not, what is that going to look like?
So because the grievance is closed and you've completed your closed session, we're now in open session. That's not something that we want to discuss in front of the public. You're left to consider what you saw on the record.
So for the record, that's something that I'll ask moving forward. We just want to, like you said, we're moving forward. We want to make sure the climate for our administration is positive and that we all make mistakes, but how can we continue to move forward? I'm not questioning the move. By policy, you can. So that's my 2 cents. But moving forward, we want to make sure that when we have leaders, we keep them, we grow them, and we work with them to transition either way. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do you have a motion?
My motion would be, it's a level 3, I'm reading all of it, level 3 grievance hearing, as far as the recommended, or the remedy, not to approve the remedy requested, which is to reinstate Ms. Cerda. That is administrative ability to do. I think it's DC or DK. So that is my recommendation.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Guerrero. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Item number 6, public hearing. Proposed 2025-2026 tax rate. Mr. David Solis.
Good evening, Vice President Guerra, members of the board, Superintendent Vasquez, and members of our community. David Solis, Chief Financial Officer for the district. This evening, we're holding the required public hearing to present and discuss the proposed tax rate for the 25-26 fiscal year. We'll begin with a review of key dates, then discuss recent legislative changes and how they may affect property values. From there, we will discuss the proposed tax rate, what it means for taxpayers, and the steps the board must take to formally adopt the tax rate. Our goal is to make sure that both the board and our community have a clear and complete understanding of the proposal and its impact before any action is taken this evening. On June 24th, the board adopted the operating budget for the 25-26 fiscal year. A month later, on July 24th, we received our certified property values from the Central Appraisal District. These values play a key role in the calculation of the maximum compressed tax rate that is submitted as part of the local property value survey. We submitted the local property value survey to the Texas Education Agency, and it was reviewed and approved by the agency on July 29th. As required by law, we published the notice for this public hearing in the El Paso Times on August 4th and posted it on our finance website that same day. The next day, TA issued the preliminary maximum compressed tax rates for all districts. And although the deadline to adopt a tax rate is at the end of September, our proposed rate is above the state's threshold, which means a tax ratification election must be called or ordered. The deadline to order or call that election is August 18th, so we are here this evening to ensure that we meet that deadline. As just mentioned, on July 24th, the board adopted the district's operating budget for the 25-26 school year. We adopted balanced budgets for both the general fund and the child nutrition fund. We adopted a surplus budget for the debt service fund, resulting in the adoption of the operating budget that reflected a total surplus of $7 million. In the most recent legislative session, lawmakers passed several bills aimed at providing tax relief. These changes will require voter approval in November before they can take effect. Senate Bill 4 raises the homestead exemption from $100,000 to $140,000. Senate Bill 23 increases the exemption for seniors and people with disabilities from $10,000 to $60,000. House Bill 9 increases the business personal property exemption from $2,500 to $125,000. If approved, the increased exemptions will significantly change the taxable value of properties in our district. This is a new slide. This wasn't included in your packet. However, earlier this week, we did receive the certified appraisal rolls from the Central Appraisal District. We received the appraisal rolls for properties at both the previous and legislatively approved exemptions. This slide shows the effect of the proposed new exemptions. As you can see, if voters approve these changes, about 8,000 more properties in our district will no longer pay school property taxes. This directly impacts our total taxable value. Considering the proposed new exemptions, our district's total taxable property value decreased by $1.1 billion, or 6.9% compared to last year. When we calculated the maximum compressed tax rate for 2025, TA required us to use these higher exemption amounts, even though voters must still approve them in November. And I believe Ms. Gardea had a question in the previous workshop regarding this slide, but the maintenance and operations, or M&O, portion of our tax rate starts with the maximum compressed tax rate set by the state. With board approval, the maximum compressed tax rate can increase up to 5 pennies. In order to access additional local revenue, the tax rate can be increased up to 12 more pennies with voter approval. Looking at our tax rate history, the district's M&O tax rate has stayed under $1 for many years. Beginning in 2019, the M&O tax rate has dropped by about 30 cents because of tax rate compression. The proposed M&O tax rate for this year is 0.7889, which includes 12 voter approval pennies. Bless you.
Bless you. Bless you.
This slide shows how our adopted tax rates have changed over time, as well as the proposed tax rates for the upcoming year. You'll see both parts of the tax rate here: the maintenance and operation portion, which funds day-to-day operations and educational programs, and the interest and sinking portion, which pays for debt on voter-approved bonds. This slide provides a comparison of the total tax rate of the adopted tax rate in tax year 24 and the proposed tax rate for 2025. The proposed tax rate is the same as last year, meaning there is a net zero change in the tax rate from one year to the next. In other words, the overall tax rate taxpayers will see on their bills would not increase or decrease compared to last year. So even though the total tax rate is remaining the same, the higher exemptions mean the average homeowner would pay about $345 less in school property taxes than they did last year. In other words, most homeowners will see a decrease in their school tax bill despite no change in the overall tax rate. This slide explains a few key terms to make school tax rates easier to understand. The first is the no new revenue tax rate. This is a rate that would bring in the same amount of money as last year from the same properties. You can think of this as a no change rate if property values and new construction stayed exactly the same. Next is the voter approval tax rate. It is the highest rate the district can set without asking voters for permission. Our proposed tax rate is higher than the voter approval rate, which means state law requires a tax ratification election. In that election, voters would decide whether to approve the higher rate, which would provide additional local funding to support our school staff and programs. One of the things I'd like to point out here is you can see that the voter approval rate is still lower than the no new revenue rate. And just to put it in context, I mentioned the $345 savings, right? For every penny that we decrease the tax rate, the taxpayer would see on average about $9 reduction in their bill. So, if it's 8 cents, you're looking at about $74 or $75 because it's a little more than 9 cents. At 12 cents, you're looking at about $111, but I just thought I'd point that out. So even the voter approval tax rate is lower than the no new revenue tax rate. So what is a VATRI or a VADER, as different people say it? So the voter approval tax rate election, it's a special election that lets our community decide whether the district can set a higher maintenance and operation tax rate than what the state allows without an election. Approving the higher tax rate would bring in more local funding that stays right here in our district. The funding could help maintain and strengthen our educational programs. If voters approve the VATRI, we can move forward with the higher tax rate and the added funding it brings. If voters do not approve it, we must adopt a lower voter approval rate. That would mean less local revenue, which could limit our ability to maintain current programs and services at the same level. This is a slide that I have provided previously regarding the impact of the VATRI. We do have the ability to go up 12 cents. 3 of those cents are considered golden pennies. 9 of those are considered copper pennies. Each of the golden pennies would generate about $7.7 million in additional revenue, $6.2 million coming from the state and $1.5 million coming from the local tax base. In total, we estimate that the 3 additional pennies would generate an additional $23.1 million additional annual revenue. The 9 pennies, each penny would generate about $1.4 million in additional state revenue, and the same $1.5 million or $2.9 million for each penny. Those 9 pennies would generate an estimated $26.1 million in additional annual revenue. Combined, we estimate that the 12 pennies would generate an estimated $49.2 million in additional revenue. Now, in order to go out for a voter approval tax rate election, an efficiency audit is required, and that efficiency audit was approved by the board on June 24th. There is language that that would allow us not to conduct an efficiency audit if there was a disaster declaration declared by the governor. That declaration, as it pertains to border security, was actually declared on June 21st. So that was a couple days before the board meeting, and that's the reason I didn't present it to you all, because it was just shortly before. And plus, I think that the efficiency audit is a good tool to provide transparency to our community as we asked if the board moves forward, as we're asking them to increase the tax rate on the M&O side. Okay. So before the district can collect property taxes for the year, the board must formally adopt the tax rate through an official resolution or order. This process must follow specific state requirements. One of the requirements is that the tax rate vote must be separate from the budget adoption vote. So we did our budget adoption in June, and now we're bringing the tax rate adoption to you all. Additionally, it must be a record vote. So if the proposed tax rate is higher than the no new revenue rate, the law requires a record vote. That means each board member's vote is recorded by name, and at least 60% of the board must vote in favor. This 60% requirement is of the total board. So obviously there's 7, so it would require at least 5 vote, regardless of who is present. There's also required motion language. The state requires that the motion be read exactly as follows. If we were to move forward, I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 1.0589, which effectively is an 8.22% increase in the tax rate. Additionally, there is required wording in the resolution and that we must post on our website. And it's a statement that reads, this year's levy to fund maintenance and operations expenditures exceeds last year's maintenance and operations tax levy. The tax rate will effectively be raised by 24.98% and will raise taxes for maintenance and operations on a $100,000 home by approximately $120. These requirements are in place to make sure the process is transparent and that both the board and the public are fully informed before the tax rate is adopted. This slide just shows our finance website with the postings. You can see as of August 4th, we did post not only the voter approval rate, we also posted the proposed tax rate for our community. We also posted the required statement. Additionally, we did provide copies of the public notice that was published in the El Paso Times. We went further and actually provided the tax rate calculations. So we not only provided the tax rate on our website, but we also submitted it as required to the El Paso Central Appraisal District's property tax search, that as our community or as residents search their property values, they can see what the impact of the tax rate has. And then also, we also have a link on our website to that Truth in Taxation webpage. So additionally, we did create, similar to the budget adoption, a little pamphlet that was made available to the public today. It does contain a QR code that provides them with links to those documents. You also were provided a copy of those. At this time, I welcome any questions or comments from the board. Additionally, since this is a public hearing, I also welcome input from members of the community.
Questions of the board? Mr. Woodcraft?
Mr. Solis, thank you. And I know we've had numerous conversations over the past week on this topic. If we can go back one slide to the website posting. I don't know, and I'm gonna get my thoughts out and then I'll ask the question again, but I don't know if there's a way to change the bond language, and here's my concern. If we vote to approve this, it is going to be a massive educational and marketing attempt to reach voters on what's really happening. When I look at this verbiage, the tax rate will effectively be raised by 25%. When we look at the environment that we're in our community, UMC is probably going to add $72 a year. The county is looking at about $181 increase, and the city's looking at around $83. That's a property tax increase on average of $336 for every homeowner in our community that they don't get a vote on, but they get to vote on ours. And they're going to walk into the ballot box, and most folks, if we can't reach them with what we're really doing by lowering the INS to offset the M&O, are going to see a 25% increase, and we're going to get a big no button. And that is my concern. So is there any way to alter that bond language? I'm getting the east and west from Mr. Blanco.
So also in the packet and later on, there is the language that will be in the order is different than this one because it requires a different language. That one looks at the increase. The calculation is a little bit different because it's not looking at the no new revenues, so it's a different calculation on that one. And so when we look at the calculation for that, we're actually just looking at what the increase of the M&O tax rate is for that calculation. So the language would read not 22, not the 24.8, or let me go back to my notes. So it wouldn't read the 24.98%. It actually, the calculation would be based on the, thank you, Matt, on the M&O tax rate. So if we were looking at that increase is only 14.91%. So it's not the 24 that's presented here, but it's still an increase to your point. So so the language on the order does read differently.
Okay. And that's going to be an uphill battle. I don't think there's any way to get around that. That is going to be an uphill battle from a voter education perspective. The other question I had, and this is one we briefly talked about. I think it's on slide 15, and you touched on it earlier, but the no new revenue tax rate is actually higher than our voter approval tax rate is. If we were to adopt the no new revenue tax rate, that's still within that 5 penny threshold, so we wouldn't have to go to the voters to adopt the no new revenue tax rate. Is that accurate?
So on the no new revenue tax rate, so if we were to do the no new revenue tax rate, since it is higher than the voter approval tax rate, we would still, so the way it works is any rate that's above the 93.89, it does require voter approval.
So regardless, even if I were to just dig my feet in and be like, nope, No new revenue tax rate. That still requires us to go on the ballot in November because it's higher than the voter approval rate, correct?
The only way to avoid or to avoid the ordering of a tax rate election is to adopt a tax rate that is either at or lower than the voter approval tax rate.
Quick question on that. Is this common for a no new revenue tax rate to be higher than the voter approved tax rate, or is this just a unique situation? Right now, I'm just curious among governmental entities.
So I can tell you that the reason it's probably more common than not for school districts is because of tax rate compression. The other entities don't have tax rate compression. And
Gotcha.
if I go back a couple slides, let me just go back to this slide, the M&O tax rate. You can see, as I mentioned before, as soon as I believe it was the 86th or 87th legislative session, as soon as they introduced tax rate compression, our tax rate has been compressed by 30 cents. Most other governmental entities don't see that. In addition, their taxes aren't affected by the homestead exemption.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In either for the no new revenue tax rate or the Vader, Vatra, however you want to bouge it up, Mr. Solis. And this might be a question that's more appropriate for 8D, but I'm going to ask it now since we're on the topic. We have to pay the county to put our stuff on the ballot anyways, correct? How much does that cost our taxpayers?
I'm not sure what. I don't recall the last.
Don't remember the specific number for this upcoming election because I don't think they've released the estimates yet. But generally, in the November election, they've been running $40,000 to $50,000. The May elections are a little bit more expensive because there's fewer entities, so you bear a bigger burden of the share of the cost of the election. But it's not cheap.
It's not astronomical either, but that is a cost that I want to make sure that we're taking into account as we start looking at the financial side of this. There will be a cost just to put it on the ballot, really either way that we go. And then you talk the marketing campaign and the educational campaign and everything that comes along with it. So this is not something that we're taking lightly. And I think this is more of a broader comment for those watching at home. I am very sensitive to the taxing conditions of our community. I'm very sensitive when folks have to decide what school supplies they are or are not going to buy because they have to keep the lights on or put food on the table. And so looking at every avenue is important. Looking at every cost is important. And as I mentioned last meeting, I want to commend the entire team for being creative and thinking outside of the box to do everything that we can to minimize the impact to our taxpayers going through this process. It's very easy to go, yes, anything for the kids. It's super easy to go, no, because my taxes aren't going up. But folks in this room and folks that are not in this room that may be watching put in a lot of work to get us to this point to ensure minimal to no impact to the taxpayers. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. Thank you. Mr. Guerra.
Any other comments? Thank you. At this time, this is a public hearing. If anybody from the public would like to come and speak about the proposed tax rates, please do. Thank you very much. Next item will be 7, special presentation, number 8, election law and ethics for tax ratification. Mr. Solis.
Good evening again, Vice President Guerra, members of the board, Superintendent Vasquez. I'd like to introduce Mr. Matt Hines. He is with our bond counsel, McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton, to provide a presentation to inform the board and community about the legal requirements and ethical considerations related to conducting a tax ratification election. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Hines.
Thank you, Mr. Solis, Vice President Guerra, and Mr. Vasquez, and the rest of the board. Thank you for having me. My name is Matt Hines. I'm with McCall, Parkhurst, Horton. We've been engaged by the district to work on this VATRI, which that's the language that I usually use. We usually refer to it as VATRI because Vader seems like Star Wars, and that's bad, like he's a bad guy. So VATRI is a nicer way of saying it. So I am an election lawyer. I'm not a tax lawyer, and I'm not a bond lawyer. I'm in a a group of lawyers at my firm that are bond lawyers, and what we discovered a couple years back is that these elections are becoming very, very, very complicated, especially when it comes to election ethics. So we're recognizing a new normal. We put together an elections department. So our department, all we do is elections and disputes, because the more complicated elections get, the more disputes and concerns that arise. So today, I'm going to talk about election ethics and what that means, and what that's going to mean if the board adopts the tax rate that goes above the voter approval rate and triggers a VAT-free election. This is meant to be non-exhaustive, and I would very much recommend that everyone on the board get in touch with me if you have any additional questions, and I'm at your disposal. I'll give you my card, and you can call me at any time. The goal is to spark thought and not to answer all the questions, because as I'll explain, this is kind of an area that is gray within the law. There's not a lot of good case law or good statutes explaining how these rules work. So if you come away from this presentation with one thing, this one big rule: public funds cannot be used to advocate for or against an election outcome. So if we're talking about a voter-approved tax rate election, it's either yes or no to adopt or to ratify the tax rate. So that means that public funds, what does public funds mean? Cannot be used to advocate. What does advocate mean? These are all the questions that I'm going to try to discuss in a number of examples. And we'll walk you through the statutes, and I'll also show you some case examples. So everything in state law, because election ethics is a state law, starts with the Texas Constitution. The legislature cannot authorize the grant of public money to private individuals or entities. That's a foundational principle. That means that public entities cannot just give away money to private parties, and that includes political parties, and not in the political party capital P sense, but people, individuals who are engaging in political activities. The election code is the primary source of information on how to administer elections, and it has the most important rules, which are that officers' employees cannot use public funds or internal mail systems to distribute, quote, political advertising. And political advertising is communication supporting or opposing a proposition that is published, printed, or broadcast, or appears in writing on a website. Now, this prohibition, there's a major asterisk on this prohibition. It does not apply if the communication is factually describing the purposes of the proposition. So if you're using facts to describe the purposes of the VAT-free election, you are not advocating. You are not politically advertising. So it's also important to note that the election code prohibits knowingly false and misleading statements. So public funds cannot be used to lie, for example, without running afoul of the election code. The education code also has its own rules, and those rules are particularly relevant to a board of trustees. Board of trustees cannot use public funds to electioneer. Again, another undefined term that we have to try and find some meaning for in other sources. So a Texas Attorney General opinion says that electioneering commonly means to work for the election of a candidate or a party, and here it would be for the measure. So it's a lot like advocating. Also, surprisingly, there are criminal offenses tied to using public funds and doing things with public money that would be involved in an election. So persons cannot offer or accept benefit in exchange for public servant or voter's vote. That's essentially bribery for a vote. And we'll get into an interesting example of where that bribery issue has come up. Persons cannot coerce public servants or voters, and they cannot misuse government property. So those are some main principles. There are a number of statutes and legal sources So there are a lot of individual groups that are enforcing these rules, including the Texas Ethics Commission, Texas Education Agency, the Texas Attorney General, and local district attorneys. Though it is rare to see local district attorneys involved in these situations. So what do you take away from all these laws? Does that mean that the Board of Trustees should just stay silent? Should the district just kind of be quiet the entire time? No, that's not a reasonable reaction. There are going to be risks involved with using district resources to provide education, and I use that word very consciously, education, because that's what's going on, not marketing or advertising. To educate, there's a line between marketing and advertising and educating, and so that line's not very clear. These 3 questions that I have on this presentation, I think, are 3 questions to ask yourself anytime you're trying to reach out to voters and you're wondering, is this going to cross the line or not? So these 3 questions: who's making the communication? Is it the district is putting out a pamphlet? What is the method of communication? Is this something that is being said in person at the grocery store, or is it on the district's website? And is the communication subjective or objective? And that's going to be the key to determining what advocacy is, because based on all of the opinions we've seen and all of the guidance that exists out there, advocacy essentially means subjective judgment or emotional language, making emotional appeals. So yeah, you can probably think of some black and white examples. If the district puts on its website, hey, this tax rate election is really great and you should go out and vote for it. Yeah, that's a black and white example. That would be advocacy. But most of the time, in our experience, and we deal with these elections a lot at our office, most of the time it's way more gray. So I wanted to run you through a few short cases. I know that we've already talked about a lot tonight, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But here's some examples. First example is, and I'd be interested to hear if anyone has opinions on this, because I think it could go a lot of different ways. A principal at a high school decides on their lunch break that they're going to go on Facebook on their phone and post, hey, you should vote yes on the VAT. Are they using public resources to do that? That's a difficult question. Arguably, if they're on their free time, no. But would people on Facebook be able to tell whether or not they're on their free time if it's during school hours? Maybe not. So these we tend to give conservative advice to our clients, and one of those things is to advise people who are on working hours, even if they're on their break time, to not use social media to advocate for an election. Yeah, that question can be even more complicated if it's like, oh, if you wear a shirt saying vote yes to the football game. That's a tough question. I'm not sure where the line is there. I can give you my opinions on it, but it can kind of go both ways. And ultimately, I think the takeaway should be the conservative approach would be to try and avoid the appearance of advocacy. Another great example is a reporter reaches out to both a trustee and the superintendent at the same time and says, I want to ask you both questions, and I want to include your quotes in my newspaper article about the election. Can either or both person make comments about the benefits or downsides of the election? Well, in our experience, there is a difference between the communications by trustees and the superintendent. And I was talking to Mr. Vasquez earlier, and I was explaining that superintendents are considered always on. The superintendent, when he's speaking about the election, needs to be factual. Trustees, it's more of a gray area. The test that I kind of think of is how close are you to the dais? Are you acting as if you are representing the district, or are you acting as an individual? Are you wearing a bunch of district apparel, or are you just at the grocery store talking to somebody? All of you have a First Amendment right to speak. These rules are really just pushing up against that First Amendment right. So, yes, the advice that we give our clients is that a superintendent might be held to a higher scrutiny than a trustee. So just keep that in mind. Another kind of creative situation that we have seen, and we've seen all of these, are a group of students at the high school decides that they're going to take their camera in the journalism class and create a video saying that people should vote for the tax rate election. Is that advocacy? They're doing it during school hours. They might even be using school equipment. If that's the case, it might be advocacy. If the district goes and takes that video and posts it on its website, which we've seen people do, it might be considered advocacy. But that question becomes more complicated if is it the students' own equipment? Are they doing it after hours? There's a lot of ways that this can get complicated. But that's a great example or a great segue to a very important piece of advice. We recommend that district communications about elections don't include emotional images of young children. That's something that's come up recently. So people will, I call it the aw-cute test. If you're looking at a district material and the district material has a kid and you're like, oh, that's so cute, that's probably an emotional appeal to the person who's reading that document. So that's something we always recommend. Keep it dry. So let's talk about advocacy, objective versus subjective. This can be very complicated, and words are subject to a lot of interpretation. We suggest not using words that have judgmental tone. So the needs of our students or the challenges of our district. This will result in a better outcome for our children. Those are subjective terms. If possible, we suggest avoiding slogans or things like that or check marks that might indicate to people, this is how you should believe, this is how you should think. The best advice is to provide the facts. For example, if you have any kind of hard data, EPA study, these are some just examples, EPA studies, TEA data, or fiscal ratings, you can always point to those pieces of data as facts and allow the voter to draw their own conclusion. So here's an interesting little piece of, I would say, this is a complicated one. I'd be interested to see what you think. We had a situation last year that resulted in an ethics complaint to the Ethics Commission, and it involved a trustee making statements prior to the election being ordered. I should have mentioned this at the top. These rules begin once the election is ordered. They don't apply beforehand. But with that caveat being that if a trustee were to be recorded giving a speech that included subjective language, and the district then took that video and posted it on their social media account after the election was ordered, that turned into an ethics complaint. So it's really important to recognize that even statements made before, if resurrected, if you will, can lead to problems. And I'm just going to spend very little time on these last few for a lot of reasons, but these can get very complicated when we talk about third-party groups. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me. In a lot of elections, PACs become involved. And when they do, we always advise our clients to avoid any kind of connection with those third-party groups. This is a particularly interesting topic, I think, because the way that our office looks at board policies all the time, and we we generally see two types of board policies when it comes to allowing political speech on campuses and on district property. A lenient policy and a strict policy. And in my opinion, Socorro has a more strict policy. So it's not going to be a situation where allowing individuals from outside to come on to campus and provide political speech on behalf of a PAC would be advisable, just because there's another level of issues in that there's board policy that would suggest that's not okay. So like we've had examples where parents have showed up and tried to send messages in kids' lunch boxes back to vote for or against an election, or posting up outside the pickup or drop-off area and having signs. If those PACs are given access that normal people aren't given access to, like areas that they wouldn't have access to normally, could be an issue. Another issue that comes up that we've seen is vendors. If you're hiring somebody, if the district's hiring somebody to provide services at, for example, a parent-teacher conference night, there's a taco truck that rolls up and is handing out food, but they have a vote yes sign on the side. If the district is providing funds, even if it's not the district's speech, it could be seen as problematic. And I'll end with one very special situation that recently was the subject of a TEA investigation in which a scheme was plotted by a number of principals to entice teachers to get higher voter turnout by sending forms home to students. And if teachers returned a certain number of forms, they were rewarded with being able to wear jeans for a month. The TEA's opinion on this came back and said that could have been bribery had the board actually put a stop to it early. So there are lots of creative ways to encourage people to vote, maybe not even for a certain outcome. Encouraging your voters to vote is fine, but compelling teachers to try and obtain voter participation in exchange for jeans is not a good way to go. And this last slide I keep because it usually applies in bond elections and it does not apply here, but it is a good reminder that we want to make sure that all district communications are factual and not knowingly misleading. So I know that was a lot of information, but if you have any questions, please let me know. And I would love to talk to you more about any particularized or fact-specific questions that you have in the future or now.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Do we have any questions from the board?
Mr. Vice President, may I?
Yes, sir.
Just want to know that this kind of situation from the conservative side, that certainly you have legal advice on this situation. From a practical situation, you will feel some sense of frustration, some level of caginess about going out there. And the word, for example, Mr. Woodcraft used earlier about marketing, that word probably is not going to be appropriate going forward. You can educate. So you have to really be thoughtful about going out on this. Certainly you do not want another TA investigation, as all of you know. So the question becomes, how do you go about doing this? I will tell you personally, the board that I led, one of my board members, he offers Sonic coupons on a school parking lot for voters to turn in. Use his own money to do it. But at the same time, there was a line there. And all it takes is one member of the community to turn it into the Ethics Commission. That's what triggers typically the investigation. And while Mr. Hines may not be able to say this, but the last year or 2 years, the Attorney General has been very active in looking at electioneering violations by school districts, especially school districts. So there's been multiple cases down to the principal level, the assistant principal level, and so forth. So I think I would suggest at some point, whether the staff, you spend some time with your legal counsel on some of these issues to make sure that everybody understands how you're going to march forward on this issue in terms of educating the public once you make that decision here shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. Any questions from the board?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Item 8A, consider approval of the 2025-2026 maintenance and operation tax rate. Mr. Solis.
Good evening again, Vice President Guerra, members of the board, Superintendent Vasquez. In order to support the 25-26 fiscal year budget, the administration recommends that the board adopt the 25-26 maintenance and operation tax rate of 78.89 cents per $100 valuation.
Motion to approve?
I have a motion by Ms. Gardea.
Second.
Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Rodriguez. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Solis. Item B, consider approval of the 2025-2026 interest and sinking tax rate. Mr. Solis.
In order to support the 25-26 fiscal year budget, the administration recommends that the board adopt the 25-26 interest and sinking tax rate of 27 cents per $100 of valuation.
Mr. Solis, I do have a question. On one of the other slides, we're looking at the INS, and we had 12 cents. If we were to decrease that to 13 cents, how would that benefit the district?
So you're asking me, so we've brought down, administration has brought down the INS tax rate by 12 cents. That will require us to use fund balance of about $4.5 million. Currently, as you'll see in the upcoming presentation, we currently have around $90 million in fund balance within our debt service fund. If we were to consider reducing it another penny, we would have, instead of 4.5, we'd probably be looking at about $7 million in additional contribution from the debt service fund. We'd still be able to make our debt service payment by all means, because what you have to remember is that in August, our initial payment is around a little over $30 million. So we would still have enough capacity if to go another penny. I probably wouldn't recommend anything more than that. The question that others might have might be, could we sustain this? And it would, if you were to think about it, if property values didn't increase, and if there wasn't any changes at the legislative level, then we would be contributing about $7 million each year to support this, right? But we all know, as we've presented in the past, that property values do increase. Additionally, we could look next year. We do have tax rate compression on the M&O side, so we will see further reductions in our tax rate because of the M&O side. If it is something that the board would consider to drop another penny, that means we would not show a net zero change. We'd actually show a decrease in the overall tax rate. It is something I will mention that we wouldn't be able to go out for another defeasance in terms of, because of the property tax rate, maybe out of fund balance. The other thing too is, as we look at down the road for bonds, at that point there could be the potential for a tax rate increase. But I think to answer your question, Mr. Guerra, could we do another penny? We could, and we can, knowing that property values will increase next year, we can go ahead and we could more than likely support up to another penny, but I wouldn't recommend any more.
So by increasing it 1 penny, you're saying that we'll receive an extra $7 million per year?
No, what I'm saying, by decreasing by an extra penny, we would have to use an additional about $3 million in fund balance from our reserves to make sure we meet our debt obligation. But it's doable. We have $90 million in reserves.
So this would benefit the district by decreasing it 1 penny?
Well, it would benefit the taxpayer.
So there will be no increase to the taxpayer?
There would actually be a decrease not only a decrease in tax rate, but an additional, I would say, about $9 decrease in the tax in their tax bill. So previously I had showed $345. Now you would be looking at $354, a decrease in their tax bill. So there wouldn't be a benefit to the district, but there would be additional tax relief provided to our residents.
Would we be able to mention that the day, if we approve the waiver today, would that be mentioned? There'll be a tax relief?
So the way the dynamics will work here is first, we would consider the motion for this item for the INS tax rate. Depending on what the board approves, then we would have to either keep the same language on the next item, 8C, or I would have to provide new language because the INS rate would be different if the board chose to decrease it by another penny. So additionally, the order does contain the proposed tax rate in it, so we would have to just change some of that, but we can work through those semantics.
I have a question.
Sure.
So right now, the way that it's written with a 27 cents per $100 valuation, and we just approved the maintenance and operation tax rate at 78 cents, 0.89. That means that it's a net zero change. Right now, what you're proposing for us to approve is a net zero change in tax rate. Total will be $1.05.89, 1.0589.
Correct, if the board was to move forward with the administrative recommendation, but Mr. Guerra just asked if that 27 cents, would there be capacity to bring it down to 26 cents? So instead of $1.05.89, it would be $1.04.89.
Correct, but by doing that, we would now have to go into our fund balance that we have under the INS and pay it. So it technically would cost the district more money. The tax rate would go down, but truly the impact to the homeowner would be, you said, a couple of...
It would be about $9, an additional $9.
But to the district, it was...
It's about $3 million for that.
Okay.
But it's just something to consider. Mr. Guerra mentioned it, so I just thought I'd...
No, I agree. And just for my visual, right now, the way it's written, it's net zero change in tax rate. With like I mentioned, the 27 cents and then the 78 or 79 cents that we approved. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Mr. Kim.
Mr. Kim?
Mr. Guerra, I'm just going to put Mr. Solis on the line here. Would you explain to the board what happens if the election does not pass in November?
Sure. So if the election does not pass in November, it's not an automatic, we just go back to the voter approval rate. The board will have to take action to set that tax rate. So more than likely it would be at the voter approval rate. So that's what would happen. So it's, sometimes the misconception is that it just automatically rolls back to the voter approval rate. That's not the case. The thing is can you, and remember after the election, we have to canvass the election. Can it be done at the same board meeting where, say, it were to fail? You canvass the election, could you then take action to adopt the voter approval rate? You could, but one of the things you have to remember is that canvassing an election only requires 2 board members. To adopt the tax rate requires a quorum. So those are things that you just have to keep in mind. So can it be done at one meeting? Absolutely. We just have to make sure there's enough members present. The other thing to remember too is, and I'll remind you on the next item, is that this is a record vote on the next item.
Any other questions?
One more point of information, because I know we've talked about this before. The average $345 savings to the taxpayer, is that with or without the potential of the homestead exemption passing in November as well?
So that is with the additional exemptions. I'd be honest, I'd be surprised if it did not pass, but there's always that chance, right? And if it weren't to pass, then even if we were to keep the tax rate the same, right, because their values would go up, they would see an increase.
Thank you.
But this is based upon the new exemptions that were passed during the most recent legislative session.
Mr. Solis, can you read the board or the administration's recommendation one more time, please?
Yes, sir. In order to support the 25-26 fiscal year budget, the administration recommends that the board adopt the 25-26 interest and sinking tax rate of 27 cents per $100 evaluation.
Motion to approve, sir.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Woodcraft, second by Mr. Smith. Discussion. Would the board consider decreasing it 13 cents where it won't affect that our constituent, our tax rate?
So, Mr. Guerra, I don't think that's a bad idea. I think for the amount of time we've talked about this over the past 4 or 5 weeks, I think it's a little late in the game to propose that and then put it back on staff. Mr. Solis, when did we have to make this decision in order to meet the gate timelines to put it on the ballot? I'm going back in my slides, see if I can find
It'd pretty much be tonight, because the last day to order an election is the 18th. So it's a very quick turnaround for, at least for this.
And so I think that would be my concern right now, Mr. Guerra, is that we would, based on the new state law, we would have to basically post notice for a brand new meeting on the 18th, right? Because it has to be 3 business days. And I think that's a quick turn timeline for our staff to be able to do that efficiently.
And based on my opinion of what I heard, it would cost the district millions to give property owners $9. I'm a property owner. I believe in our district and administration's recommendation, so that's just my opinion based on what I've heard today.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Solis.
You're welcome.
Item 8C, consider and adopt a tax rate resolution for tax year 2025 to support the FY 2025-2026 operating budget. Mr. Solis.
Sure. So this this next item does require a record vote. As I mentioned previously, it requires 60% of the elected board members to vote in favor of it, regardless of who is present. So I just wanted to keep that in mind. Keep that in mind for you all. And then I'd like to just read the resolution since we have it. Socorro Independent School District resolution adopting a tax rate for tax year 2025. The school district has adopted a fiscal year commencing July 1st and ending July 30th. The school district has received the certified taxable property value within the school district from the El Paso Central Appraisal District. The Board of Trustees has published a notice of public meeting to discuss the proposed tax budget and tax rate as required by Section 44.004 of the Texas Education Code. The Board of Trustees has conducted a public meeting on the proposed tax rate on August 14th, 2025. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the Socorro Independent School District that on this date, we, the Board of Trustees of the Socorro Independent School District, hereby levy or set the tax rate on $100 valuation of property for the tax year 2025 at a total tax rate of $1.0589 to be assessed and collected by the duly specified assessor and collector as follows. 78.89 cents M&O tax rate for the purpose of maintenance operations, and 27 cents INS tax rate for the purpose of payment of principal and interest on debts. The tax assessor collector is hereby authorized to collect taxes for the Socorro Independent School Districts at the adopted rates. This tax rate will raise more taxes for maintenance and operations than last year's tax rate. The tax rate will effectively be raised by 24.98% and will raise taxes for maintenance and operations on a $100,000 home by approximately $120. Approved and adopted this 14th day of August 2025 by the Socorro Independent School District Board of Trustees. Whoever does the motion, we do have the language. There is required language for this item.
Any questions?
Mr. Guerra, I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of $1.589, which is effectively an 8.22% increase in the tax rate.
I have a motion by Mr. Woodcraft. Second?
I second.
Second by Ms. Garcia, by Ms. Gardea. Any discussions? All those in favor?
It has to be a record vote, so we have to.
I apologize. So I'll start with my right, Mr. Rodriguez. Did I see wife? I mean right. Mr. Rodriguez.
Aye.
Mr. Woodcraft.
Aye.
Mr. Guerra, aye. Ms. Macias?
Aye.
Ms. Gardea?
Aye.
Mr. Smith? Has been approved. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
On item 8D, we have a speaker, Mr. Tom Lane.
Good evening, Board of Trustees, Vice President Guerra, Mr. Vasquez, members of the board. I'm a very conservative person. I hold on to my money very, very tightly. I'm a TRS retiree, and with inflation, I've seen the value of my purchasing dollars just go down the toilet. I'm very careful when I vote for or against measures for tax increases. I'm the kind of person who's standing before you. If I could vote to eliminate University Medical Center, I would. I think we've got enough privately owned hospitals who could meet our community's needs. I'm the kind of person who would vote against a deck for downtown El Paso over I-10 because I see it as an excess. But I will always invest in public education. Public education was my home as an employee for 27 years. With the exception of the time when my father served overseas in the military, I was always taught by public education here in this country. And so I value public education very much. And I think this is the perfect combination to offer voters a chance to bring in $49 million more dollars to the district without impacting their tax rate. I think it's a very beautiful solution that is going to add a lot of benefit. Down the road, say 10 years from now, I would hope that this board will take the right kind of action if the voters approve the VADER to use that money possibly to reduce the amount of debt that the district has so that that debt rate could be brought down. I could see where this VADER could really provide a lot of wealth and opportunity for the district in a way that will not only benefit the district, but in the long term could also benefit the taxpayers of Socorro ISD. So if you vote yes to move forward on the VADER, you have somebody standing before you who will vote yes on the VADER. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Mr. Solis.
Good evening again, Vice President Guerra, members of the board, Superintendent Vasquez. Administration recommends that the board approve the order calling for the voter approval tax rate election on November 4th, 2025 to ensure legal compliance, uphold transparency, and provide the community with the opportunity to participate in the decision regarding the district's adopted tax rate. In front of you do have the required language for this item, and also it'd be another record vote.
Any questions?
I do, well, not a question per se, but more of a statement than anything else before taking the vote. This is really, for folks, members of the public, and especially, my constituents in District 5. When I took office in May, I promised to help Socorro ISD get back on track. And together, I think we've made real progress. We've named a strong public school champion as our lone finalist for superintendent. We've passed our first balanced budget in nearly a decade, celebrated more than 3,600 graduates, brought our community together at public events like the expo, the military expo that we just experienced a couple of days ago. And we gave SISD employees their first pay increase since 2022. But even with this momentum, serious challenges remain. School districts across Texas are being asked to do more with less. Our state ranks, and this is a fact, our state ranks near the bottom nationally in funding per student. Now, following a disastrous and, in my opinion, an inhumane federal budget proposal, Congress could look at cutting $12 billion for public education for the 26-27 school year, eliminating after-school and summer programs, arts and technology classes, mental health services, and so much more. Closer to home here in Socorro ISD, we're facing a projected decline in enrollment over the next several years due to falling birth rates, which will further strain our budget. When I was a candidate, I told El Paso Matters in an interview, I am against, and quote, I'm against holding a Vader election and feel the district will need to practice financial discipline, bring in more students, and improve attendance to address its budgetary concerns. At that time, I did not see a viable path forward, but today, the facts have changed, at least for me. Departments are already scaling back, and scaling back means fewer opportunities for our students, and that's just simply something that I cannot accept. If approved by voters, this Vader would unlock approximately $50 million for our district annually. While that may sound like a lot of money, in reality, this funding will largely allow us to preserve what we currently have, with limited room to expand services. In the absence of adequate state and federal support, we are left with no other choice but to turn to local taxpayers. And just for the record, this, in my opinion, this is not normal. And this is not a vote I take lightly, or this is not a vote that I even enjoy taking. But I do want to extend my sincere thanks to the Finance and Operations Advisory Committee for their diligence, transparency, and hard work in bringing this Vader recommendation to the board. From district administrative staff who compiled and presented complex financial data, to the educators and community representatives who asked thoughtful, tough questions, to the operations team that coordinated room setup and logistics, and to our outstanding AV staff who ensured seamless technology was accessible. Every contribution was critical. This collaborative effort reflects the very best of what public engagement and accountability should look like. This is a moment to decide whether we keep the train we've put back on track moving forward or allow it to stall. Our students deserve the infrastructure, opportunities, and vision that will change the trajectory of their lives for the better. And in my belief, this is a fight worth engaging in. And so, that's just my position. I wanted to make sure to share that with members of the public, and especially with my constituents in SISD's District 5.
Any other comments?
Mr. Solis, is this also a record vote?
I believe so, it is, yes.
Sir. Any other comments?
Mr. Guerra, if there's no other comments, I move that the board adopt an order calling a tax ratification election to be held on November 4th, 2025.
Motion by Mr. Woodcraft, second.
I second.
Second by Ms. Macias. At this time, we're going to take a roll call vote, starting with my right. Mr. Rodriguez.
Aye.
Mr. Woodcraft.
I'm going to use this time for my comments. Not nearly as eloquent as Mr. Rodriguez put it, but the sentiment remains the same. I also campaigned very hardly against Vatre. But the amount of work, the amount of education, the amount of creativity, the amount of community involvement that not just the administration and the staff, but the community members and local elected officials put into getting this right has been astounding. I'm very critical of certificates of obligation that our local taxing entities utilize. I'm less critical of general obligation bonds because the voters get a say-so. And I view this very much the same way. And so my message to the voters is this district, not just the team of 8, but the administrators and the staff and the cabinet have put in the work. They've done the job the best that they can do, and ultimately, it's in the voters' hands whether this passes or not. I believe in the work that we've done together. I believe in the direction that we've headed. We're closing the past chapter and we're writing a new one, and I'm really excited to see where this book is gonna go. It's like a choose your own adventure book, right? But now it's up to the voters to figure out which direction they're gonna head. So thank you to the entire team here. Thank you to the FOAC. I think Mr. Lane, I don't know if he's still back there, right? Thank you for your leadership. And for all of those reasons, and much more eloquently put by Mr. Rodriguez, I vote yes.
Ms. Macias?
I believe in our district, and this is something that it's time, and I vote yes.
Ms. Gardea?
I vote yes as well. Mine is in the best interest of our community and the children that we represent. Absolutely yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
I myself, back several years ago, we were penalized because we didn't raise taxes. and the state penalized us. Now it's time for us to go back, and we're not raising taxes, but we could use all the money that we can. So I vote yes. Motion's approved. Thank you.
Thank
Gonna
you.
get to work.
Thank you.
Let's educate.
If there's no further business with the board, the meeting is adjourned. The time is 7:43.